Full-size spare tires. Remember when popping the trunk of a car actually meant something? You'd lift the mat and there it was. A full-size spare tire. A real wheel. The kind of backup that said, "Don't worry, kid, I got you." Nowadays, you're lucky if there's a donut back there. Or a tire repair kit, which is basically a glorified air compressor and a bottle of goo. Back in the day, car makers assumed you might actually drive somewhere. You know, long road trips, family vacations, cross-state adventures. You needed a real backup in case things went south. It was freedom, baby. Then came the age of efficiency. Automakers figured out they could save weight, money, and a few cents of fuel by ditching that extra wheel. They said it was about reducing emissions. Sure, buddy, it was about cutting costs and selling you roadside assistance plans. Full-size spares weren't just practical. They were a symbol of a time when cars were built for the long haul, not just the commute. Hand-cranked windows. Once upon a time, rolling down your car window was exercise. You'd reach over, grab a little metal handle, and start cranking like you were trying to launch a lawnmower. Welcome to the glorious era of hand-cranked windows, or as car guys like to call them, the original upper body workout plan. Before electric motors invaded everything, this was pure analog engineering. You wanted fresh air? You earned it, one crank at a time. Lefty-loosey for freedom, righty-tighty for oops, too far. And when that window finally dropped all the way down, you didn't just feel a breeze. You felt accomplishment. These things were everywhere. Sedans, trucks, even luxury cars, right up until the late 80s. Simple, mechanical, practically immortal. No motors to burn out, no fuses to blow, and if it broke, it was usually because someone forgot which way to turn and used Hulk strength. Then came the 90s, the decade of convenience. Power windows became the new must-have flex, and hand cranks got demoted to base model shame. Car makers said people don't want to work for airflow anymore, and just like that, another piece of driver fitness quietly disappeared. 85 miles per hour speedometers. Picture this, it's the early 80s. You just bought a brand new Corvette, pop-up headlights, roaring V8, pure American freedom on four wheels, and right in front of you, the speedometer tops out at 85 miles per hour. That's it, 85. Your car's begging to run wild, and your dash basically says, "Relax, cowboy, we're done here." And here's the kicker, and it wasn't just Corvettes. Every single car sold in the US back then, from muscle to minivan, was legally neutered with an 85 mile per hour speedometer. Let's rewind to 1973. The Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, OAPEC, slapped an oil embargo on nations supporting Israel during the Yom Kippur War, and one of those was the United States. Overnight, gas prices skyrocketed, lines at fuel stations stretched for miles, and suddenly, fuel efficiency became the new national religion. And in a panic to save gas, Congress passed the Emergency Highway Energy Conservation Act in 1974, introducing the infamous 55 miles per hour national maximum speed limit. The idea was simple. If you drive slower, you burn less fuel. Science even backed it up, sort of. Cars are most efficient between 40 and 55 miles per hour, but the law barely made a dent in fuel savings, less than 1%, according to the U.S. Transportation Research Board. What it did do was make driving across Kansas feel like slow torture. Then, in 1979, the NHTSA took things one step further. They didn't just want you to drive 55, they wanted you to see 55. So they capped every speedometer at 85 miles per hour and highlighted the 55 mark, like it was some sacred commandment. The result? People absolutely hated it. Enthusiasts mocked it, so much so that Sammy Hagar even wrote a song about it, "I Can't Drive 55, and became a folk hero for speed demons everywhere. Of course, the idea backfired spectacularly. People didn't suddenly become law-abiding saints. They just drove faster, but without knowing how much faster. And by 1982, Reagan's administration axed the rule and speedometers once again climbed past 120 miles per hour. Lap-only seatbelts. Alright, let's take a quick trip back to a time when cars were built like tanks. And seatbelts were, well, optional accessories. People who grew up in the 50s or 60s probably remember the lap belt, that single strap across your waist that made you feel safe, but only in the same way a paper straw protects the ocean. In 1949, Nash Motors Company became the first American automaker to actually offer seatbelts as a factory option. Pretty forward thinking, right? They even installed them in around 40,000 cars. Not bad for an era when most drivers thought safety was for the weak. Unfortunately, the public wasn't ready. People thought belts were uncomfortable, unnecessary, or that they'd get trapped in the car during a crash. So most buyers literally told dealers to remove them. Still, Nash planted the seed. By the mid-1950s, other manufacturers, like Ford in 1956, started offering lap belts as optional extras. And by optional, they meant you had to pay for them. Can you imagine? Would you like to add our internal organ crusher package? That'll be $27. It sounds insane today, but back then, lap belts were considered revolutionary safety gear. But the problem was they didn't really save you. They just changed how you got hurt. In the event of a collision, the lap belt would hold your hips in place, but your upper body kept going at 40 or 50 miles per hour. Your torso folded like a human taco, and the belt dug into your abdomen with all that force. Doctors even came up with a name for it, seatbelt syndrome, a gruesome mix of crushed internal organs and spinal injuries, and this is where Volvo entered the scene. In 1959, 1939, Swedish engineer Niels Bohlin invented the three-point seatbelt, and the one that crosses your shoulder and waist. It distributed the crash force across your chest, shoulder, and pelvis instead of one brutal line across your gut. Honestly, Volvo could have patented it and made millions, but instead, they gave it away for free. Because, saving lives was more important than making a quick buck. Meanwhile, American manufacturers dragged their feet and stubbornly said no. After all, adding a shoulder strap meant redesigning interiors, which meant spending money. So, lap belts hung around for another decade or so, before it became mandatory by 1968. Horizontal speedometer dashboard. You ever sit in an old car and think, what the hell is that thing supposed to be? You squint at the dash, and instead of a normal round gauge, there's this glowing strip stretching across the dashboard. Congratulations, you've just met the horizontal speedometer. Back in the 1950s and 60s, automakers were obsessed with making cars look futuristic. Everything had to scream jet age, tail fins, chrome, rocket badges. Even the dashboard had to look like it was borrowed from a spaceship. So instead of a simple dial with a needle, some genius thought, hey, what if your speed slid across the dash like a radar? And that's how we got it. A long horizontal bar where your speed didn't spin. It moved. When you hit the gas, a little red line or drum would glide from left to right, telling you how fast you were going. It looked awesome at night, especially when it glowed in radioactive green or red. Also, the idea made sense. Your eyes could just flick to the line's position instead of tracking a needle. But as cool as it looked, there were problems. In bright sunlight, it was about as readable as a 2000 Nokia with a cracked screen. And by the late 1970s, the dream died. Automakers realized circular gauges were just better, easier to read, easier to build, and way less gimmicky. So the horizontal speedometer quietly disappeared, taking a bit of that retro sci-fi charm with it. Handbrakes. The not electronic kind. You know what kids today will never understand? The pure joy of yanking a proper handbrake. We're talking about that old school metal lever between the seats, not the fancy little button modern cars call a parking brake. Back in the day, that lever wasn't just for parking. It was a weapon, a tool for chaos. You'd pull it at the right moment and the car would swing around like it was auditioning for a Fast and Furious movie. Fast forward to today and, well, good luck trying that with an electronic parking brake. Most new cars have traded that iconic lever for a plastic toggle switch. Sure, it's convenient. It engages automatically, releases when you drive, and won't accidentally send you spinning into a curb. But man, it kills the vibe. Pull it while moving, and instead of glorious tire smoke, you get a message on the dash. Parking brake unavailable while driving. So yeah, progress is nice, until it takes the fun out of being stupid in a controlled environment. Long radio antennas. Remember when cars used to have those tall, shiny metal sticks poking out of their fenders? Yeah, the ones that made your ride look like it was trying to talk to aliens? That, folks, was the long radio antenna. Back in the 50s, when Blaupunkt dropped the first in-car FM radio, people lost their minds. Suddenly, you weren't just driving, you were cruising with a soundtrack. And to make that happen, cars needed these long metal wands to catch radio waves out of thin air. FM signals are basically invisible electricity floating through the sky, and those antennas were like fishing rods, casting out and reeling in your favorite songs. Some antennas were retractable, and those were the fancy ones. You'd stroll up, pull it out like a sword, and instantly feel 10% cooler. Others, they just stood tall 24/7, ready to whack tree branches, poke pedestrians, or make your car look like it was leading an orchestra in traffic. Then came the late 60s when GM thought they'd reinvent the game. They built the antenna into the windshield on the 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix. Sounds futuristic, right? Yeah, except the reception sucked harder than a dial-up modem. Eventually, car makers got better at hiding antennas in the glass, the roof, even the rear windows, until the iconic shark fin design showed up and took over everything. T-tops. Oh boy, the T-top. The love child of a convertible and a hardtop, designed by someone who clearly couldn't make up their mind. Invented by General Motors in the late 1960s, it was an idea so wonderfully American that it could only have come from the same country that once tried to put a jet engine in a car. The concept was simple. Take a normal coupe, cut out a massive chunk of the roof, then leave a metal strip down the middle shaped like the letter T. Add 2 removable glass panels on either side, and voila. You had the illusion of open-air freedom without the structural wobbles of a full convertible. It was brilliant and utterly ridiculous. Between 1968 and 1982, the Corvette made the T-tops famous, giving drivers the best of both worlds. Sunshine and speed, with just enough roof left to make you feel secure, then everyone wanted in. Ford, Chrysler, Pontiac, they all joined the T-top party. It was a glorious era of feathered hair, cigarette smoke, and Burt Reynolds casually outrunning the law in hit movie Smokey and the Bandit. If your car had T-tops, you weren't just driving, you were starring in your own movie. But as with all great things from the disco era, it didn't age well. T-tops leaked, they squeaked, they rattled like a shopping cart on a gravel road, and after a few years, every weather seal on Earth seemed to give up at once. And by 2002, when the fourth-generation Camaro and Firebird bowed out, the T-top went with them, taking with it an entire era of automotive optimism and questionable style choices. No head restraints. Did you know that before cars even existed, whiplash was called railway spine? Yeah, back in the 1800s, it was something doctors noticed after train crashes. And when cars came along, it wasn't until the 1950s that doctors started considering whiplash a real injury. Back in the early days, car seats were low-backed, flat, and proud of it. No headrest, no support, just a ticket to the chiropractor. A few luxury cars had high-back seats, but those were more for showing off than saving lives. Thin padding over a metal frame that did absolutely nothing in a crash. Because apparently in the old days, people's necks were made of steel. But here's what happens when your car doesn't have a headrest. You get hit from behind, and your body gets shoved forward with the seat. But your head, it stays behind, just for a split second, before snapping backward at lightning speed. Your neck stretches like a bungee cord, ligaments tear, muscles scream, vertebrae crack, and then your head slingshots forward again. It's like cracking a whip, except you are the whip. By the late 1960s, doctors and regulators finally caught on that maybe, just maybe, people's necks shouldn't be used as suspension springs. And in 1969, the US made head restraints mandatory, and suddenly every car seat had this odd little pillow sticking out the top. Early versions looked awkward, like someone had glued a sofa cushion to the seat, but they worked. Whiplash cases dropped dramatically. Pop-up windshields. Have you ever heard an idea that sounds absolutely genius on paper, but turns out to be straight up ridiculous in real life? Yeah, that's pop-out windshields. Back in the 50s and early 60s, some cars came with what were called pop-out safety windshields, and we swear that was the actual marketing term. The idea was simple. If your car rolled over or your doors got jammed, the windshield would eject itself and let you crawl to safety. Nice in theory, until reality hit, literally. What they didn't quite think through was that in a crash, it wasn't you escaping through the windshield. It was you getting launched through it. These things were barely attached. No glue, no bolts, just a big sheet of glass pressed into a rubber gasket, hoping physics would be kind. But the second your car hit something solid, that safety feature turned into a glass cannon. The whole windshield could pop out like a champagne cork, sometimes flying 20 feet away. And if you weren't wearing a seatbelt, which most people weren't, congratulations, you were now the cork. Eventually, car makers realized maybe the glass shouldn't leave the car during an accident, and thus the bonded windshield was born, glued to the frame with urethane so it actually stayed put. Before we reveal the final three, make sure to leave a like and share your thoughts on which old school car feature do you miss the most from the ones we've mentioned so far. Cassette and CD players, the soundtrack of a generation. Back when the engine wasn't the heart of your car, it was the stereo. And before Bluetooth, before Spotify, before your phone could hold 1,000 songs you'd never listened to, there were cassette tapes. It all started in 1968 when Philips dropped the first in-car radio with a built-in cassette player. Overnight, every drive became a concert, every mixtape a love letter, and every pencil in the glove box a survival tool for rewinding your favorite tape after it got chewed up. It was crude, it was clunky, but man, it was magic. There was something deeply satisfying about slamming that plastic cassette into place, hearing the click, and feeling the car fill with music. Your music. Fast forward to the 1980s, and we enter the age of excess. Mercedes-Benz, being the tech-savvy luxury trendsetter it was, introduced the first factory CD player at the Becker, Mexico, around 1985. Suddenly, you could skip songs instantly and listen without the background hiss of analog tape. But of course, CDs had their quirks too. One nasty speed bump, and your music would skip like a nervous DJ. And heaven forbid you leave your discs in the sun. They'd warp faster than your patience in rush hour traffic. Still, for a glorious couple of decades, the cassette and the CD ruled the roads. Today, we tap on touchscreens instead of slamming in tapes. It's more convenient, sure, but it doesn't feel the same. Modest in-car lighting. Have you ever noticed how stepping into a modern car at night feels less like driving and more like logging into a spaceship? Screens glowing, ambient lights pulsing, every surface shining like you're in a nightclub designed by IKEA. But once upon a time, before cars had mood lighting and infotainment systems, interiors were actually dark, calm, functional. Back then, modest in-car lighting wasn't just a design choice, it was survival for your eyeballs. The idea was simple. Keep things dim enough so you could still see the road. Early dashboards gave you just enough glow to check your speed or see how much fuel you had left, and that was it. No 12-inch LED panels screaming in your face, no RGB strips under your knees, no customizable color themes. Just a few softly lit gauges and a radio dial that glowed like a campfire for your commute. It was the driving equivalent of reading by candlelight. Simple, focused, kind of romantic, romantic, honestly. The red lighting trend, by the way, wasn't just for looks. There's science behind it. Red light helps preserve your night vision. That's why submarines and aircraft cockpits use it. In old school cars, some dashboards used red or amber bulbs for exactly that reason. It kept drivers alert without blinding them. Cheerful colors and trims. Remember when cars actually had personality? When you could spot a car in the parking lot without having to hit the panic button on your key fob? Yeah, that was the age of cheerful colors and wild trims. The 1980s and 1990s were the automotive equivalent of a Friday night disco. Loud, unapologetic, and kind of awesome. You had bright teals, screaming yellows, deep purples, and that oh-so-iconic teal on purple combo that somehow just worked. Interiors? Forget 50 Shades of Grey. We're talking red velour seats, patterned cloth inserts, neon backlighting, and dashboards that looked like arcade machines. Even humble commuter cars had some flair. A Civic from '92 had more personality in its upholstery than most modern crossovers have in their entire design. And the thing is, people loved it. Cars felt alive, they matched your vibe. You could buy something cheerful without being judged. A turquoise Miata? Cool. A yellow CRX? Perfect. A two-tone Bronco with tan cloth seats? Chef's kiss. Then came the 2000s, and it's like someone hit the desaturate button on the entire industry. Suddenly, every car was silver, black, or some shade of sad gray. Interiors turned into grayscale caves with plastic pretending to be aluminum. Sure, things got more refined, more premium, but they also got boring. The fun just vanished. We hope you enjoyed this video. Here's another one you'll love. As always, thanks for watching.